Welcoming to the podcast, Sexy Aging today. It's my pleasure to introduce Helen Brown. And Helen is the head of media and investment for a company called PhD in Auckland, New Zealand. And we've actually met in person. And this is really unusual because so many of my guests, many of them live overseas, or we've never had an opportunity to meet in person. Obviously, COVID had a big part of that when the podcast started. So I'm really grateful that we've met in person, and we met at an event to talk about menopause in the workplace, which you were part of organising, which was so fantastic. It was held at Google headquarters, and there were women from different leadership positions and different companies that came to enjoy a lunch with us. And I felt like it was a really heartfelt opportunity to really open up the conversation of this is what so many women are experiencing in the workplace.
So true. I had so much positive feedback after that session as well. I think it was just the frankness that everyone came, to talk with was amazing. So it was great.
Yeah. And that's what I'm learning as well, is like, it's better just to be really open and frank and just tell it like it is. I mean, it comes with a lot of fear mongering, but obviously if you've got, a bit of tips and tricks to survive it kind of thing, you don't want people leaving feeling, oh shit, is this what's going to happen? You want people going, okay, all right, educated, now I know what to do.
100%.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Helen. Like, we've kind of had, short talks and shared experiences, obviously around menopause, but share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I have worked in media, so within media agencies for, I'm going to say around 30 years now. And I've actually been with PhD Media since we started in 1999. So, and what's great about that is I have actually grown, into lots of different roles as I've progressed through the business, which has given me lots of opportunity and inspiration, and has really helped, I think, keep me in the industry, but also in the agency that I'm in. And I've done that alongside having two boys. So my partner Mel and I, we have two boys who are 25 and now 22. So we've kind of, I guess, grown up with them as a working mum in my area, which has been, actually great in terms of, I think, them seeing kind of what opportunities there are out there for women. I moved into a leadership role in PhD probably around 5 years ago, which actually happened to coincide with menopause. So that wasn't really ideal, but I think that happens to a lot of women actually in this reality that we're in. So it's actually quite pertinent to our discussion today. But, I think, given kind of the experience that I've had kind of both at home and at work with what was impacting me, it's been a bit of a journey. So not necessarily all bad, certainly a lot of internal growth and learning along the way, but certainly a challenge nonetheless.
Yeah. Oh gosh, so much of what you've already said. I'm excited to sort of unpack that and dive a little deeper. So let's get back to, understanding what menopause was. What was your sort of first experience of coming up against the word menopause? Think back to when you might have heard it, and what did you actually think about what that meant for you?
Yeah, I to be honest, I hadn't given it much thought. I knew that my mum had, gone through it, but hadn't experienced, well, she didn't say that she'd experienced, symptoms. So I wasn't really expecting to, also, see any symptoms off the back of that. I knew about hot flushes. That was pretty much the biggest thing that I knew I was very likely to experience. But in terms of the more physical experience and also the mental, psychological impacts, I wasn't expecting those at all. So they came as quite a surprise. And I think even when I was going through that, I wasn't necessarily connecting them back to menopause at the time. So it's just, I, thought I was going a bit crazy, going a bit mad, losing my way a bit, as opposed to actually, these were symptoms that I could have done something about at the time and taken more control of. So I kind of went into it a bit blind, I think. And I think even 5 years ago, there was so much less discussion around this. None of my friends were talking about it at the time. I don't recall seeing things in the media. I just wasn't coming across anything in the workplace either. And I work in an industry that doesn't have many women in their 50s and 60s. So there was no one to kind of learn from that had gone before me either. So that I think was kind of the biggest challenge for me going through that. So just not expecting what was going to happen to my body and to my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that a lot of women will resonate with what you've just said, particularly if they are working or have been working for a number of years and then sort of moving up the ranks in their career, coming up against symptoms at the same time, right? So, and then having those moments of doubt and the madness that you explained. And that doesn't, I mean, that's just coupled with all the physical symptoms, that those feelings of, God, am I getting too old for this?
Yes, yeah.
The aches, the pains, the fatigue, that stuff. So, I mean, I've sort of mentioned a few symptoms. What were the main ones for you? You said hot flashes. Did you actually have them, or?
I never, I mean, I just got hot in general. So and I still am, like I still sleep, I just sleep with a sheet at night, most nights. I don't cool down. I get into bed, the room might be cold, but I'm warm the minute my body hits that bed. It just doesn't matter. But I certainly, and I still get hot when I'm talking often. And I would experience that. I do a lot of presentations within my role, whether internal or external, with clients, and I just started, talking, and I would just literally start, going red and sweating, and so that was new to me, and that was quite the challenge. But I think definitely brain fog, memory loss hit me quite badly. I would be in meetings and it stopped me from participating, I guess, in meetings, because I would go to say something and I just couldn't quite find the word that I was looking for. And that still happens. I've got a bit better in terms of I now try and write down things that I think are really important I'm going to have to pull out in a meeting. So, but I guess kind of the mental hits were very much anxiety and a kind of emotion. So I could get very angry very quickly about things. They would just hit me, and kind of very emotional in terms of quite up and down in terms of how I was feeling. And it might be a work related thing, or it might be a home related thing. And often, they merge, don't they, in real life. So, but I think at the time, what was driving so much of this was the fact I just wasn't sleeping. I couldn't sleep, for trying. So, once that starts happening, you get into such a bad space, in your head, because you just can't ever catch up, and so you can't think logically, and then you're tired, and then your brain won't work, and then you feel, you lose your confidence, the anxiety sets in. So so it kind of snowballs into so many different ways. But I think that the mental blocks that I was having was the hardest part. But alongside that, I was getting aching joints, my hair was thinning, so you start to really feel like you are getting old quite quickly, and it kind of really hits you like a ton of bricks, I think, as well.
Yeah, like you're literally, I'm mentally going through my checklist as you're listing off all the symptoms, and I feel like anyone that's listening to this will just feel such a connection with what you've explained, and then how that rolls between being at home and being at work. If we sort of double down on the work conversation, I think we've spoken of this, and I feel it too. Like my heart sort of races a little bit when you talk about brain fog, confidence, and sort of the anxiety related to work performance. As you're experiencing what we know now as perimenopause symptoms in the workplace, how did that make you feel while you're actually at work? These things are happening. Did you start to have like these doubts around, oh God, what's going on with me? And, just that, oh God, you go, Helen. I can't talk.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I really thought I was losing the plot. And I think because my confidence got to such a low ebb, I think that you can't think logically. So your mind goes into such bad places that I think it's really hard to keep going. It's really hard to have the confidence to do your job. You're mentoring people, you're running teams, you're giving advice to other people at the same time that you're kind of crumbling a little bit inside, I think. So I think there's no easy way to say it. It was really, really hard. And I look back now and go, I can't believe that I kind of went through all of that. And over quite a long period of time, because I couldn't put the dots together to connect that back to perimenopause or menopause. I just couldn't see that. I just thought that I, was really struggling in my role with what I was doing. At the same time, knowing that I'm extremely capable and I can do a really good job, but just not having the confidence, to kind of back myself in that. So I feel like, what people were seeing from me in the workplace was definitely not at my best, and that's, I look back on that and I find that still hard to think about. It still
Yeah.
really hits you, but
Yeah.
I mean, it did happen. That's what it was. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect now, because I still, I think I still have those moments, but not to the same, not to the same extent, because I can control them a bit more, because I can control my mind. I understand now where my mind's trying to go with that, and I can control it. And I think that's where I am now. But if I look back to where I was 4 or 5 years ago, there were moments where I'd have thought maybe I'm just not cut out for this role, for this business, and that's quite a hard thing to go through in your head at the time.
Yeah, and I reckon it's really difficult for companies as well, who have women like yourself, so experienced with such an incredible depth of knowledge around your skills and your expertise. There are thousands of women feeling exactly that same way. And, Dr. Linda Deer recently put out her survey, and there's a whole lot more statistics that she's going to be sharing, but I'm so lucky that I get to have a convo with her. So she's, the stats on New Zealand women have said that 80% of women working in the workforce feel impacted by their menopause symptoms in the workplace, like 80%. So we listen to your story, you give a story, I've told mine a few times, but we know that 4 out of 5 women in the workplace going through perimenopause are having these moments. And not knowing, some of them not knowing why. Obviously, just the beginning stages of menopause is a challenge. It's like, well, for you and I, it's like 2 or 3 years of symptoms before you go, what the heck is this, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, because the symptoms don't all come at once. That's kind of progressive, and so they change as well. So you might think you're back on top of one of your symptoms, or you're trying to address one of the symptoms, and then next week there's something else that kind of joins in, and you're like, what is going on with my body? I feel like everything's breaking down. So it's just not clear cut necessarily, And when I talk to people about it now, they might have a couple of symptoms, and it's kind of like, well, just be aware of the other symptoms, because they will creep up on you in some cases.
Yeah. So moving on to something like moving into the positive realm, because I think it's really good for women to understand that you've had that experience. It's a lived experience, menopause at a high level in the workplace. So what support were you offered, or how did you approach people in the workplace to get some level of understanding and empathy and support? Like, how did you start that conversation? Because I think that this is probably the glue that's going to help a lot of people.
It's interesting, because it took me so long to figure out that it was menopause. And I mean, the chances of everyone else working around me trying to understand that was the case as well was pretty low, right? So, and that's not on them, because no one was talking about it. So I started by doing an awful lot of research myself, just online, and just kind of finding a lot of what was being talked about and discussed. There's, I think over the last, probably 3 to 4 years, there's been kind of a lot more information being shared. So that was great. I think, as I was going through such a hard time at work, and I was talking to one of my colleagues, and I was lucky enough that we'd had some leadership training, about 3 years prior to this, that she suggested that I link back in with that. It was led by a psychologist, to link back in with her for some coaching. So which I did, and which was fantastic, because we didn't discuss menopause, because again, I hadn't quite connected that yet, but just the being able to go and talk to someone about what was going on in my head, and for them to kind of talk me through that and kind of go, well, what's going to happen if that happens, and what are you doing about that? And it was, and outside of our business, it was so important. And I probably had about 4 sessions, I think, with her over a 2-month period. And, I just really helped rebalance myself mentally. And I think that was really strong. And so I think post that, then I could start have conversations in the business, because then I could acknowledge that I was actually, really struggling in some areas, and kind of identify what those areas were. And it was only after that I could actually connect them back to menopause. And that was because of all the, the trawling through the web that I was doing, really finding information. So that's when it kind of started to come together for me. And then I could have a conversation with our CEO around, I think we need to start talking about menopause in the workplace, because if I'm having this trouble now, I don't want other people in our business to have to go through what I've done. But to do that, you have to be really honest, right?
Or
As a business.
vulnerable, right? Because you're also putting
Yeah.
yourself in front of someone and saying, there might be a reason to some of the challenges that I've had, or that I didn't quite hit the nail on the head with that brief, or, like you're actually coming forward and saying that
Yeah.
and going, I
Yeah.
believe that this
Yeah.
thing has actually impacted me, and hoping that they get it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
which is scary, right? Because you are
Yeah.
kind of really opening yourself up. I mean, I'm lucky. I mean, as you met, we've got a really strong senior leadership team that are quite a strong female
Yeah.
component. So the CEO is a woman, and younger than me, but extremely approachable in this area. So I could have some pretty honest conversations, and I think, while there's not many women in our business in their 50s and 60s, there's certainly a lot of women in their 40s and late 40s coming up. And so I think, for the benefit of everybody and for our business, because we do not want to lose women on this journey from our industry, let alone from our business, it's something that we are now looking at within our business, in terms of how do we broaden this conversation internally and make it less taboo, and a more supportive environment. So, I mean, I think I was really lucky in terms of the team that we had. But I always feel like, like with having kind of kids and the parental support you got in the
Yeah.
workplace, I'm always like 5 years too early.
Yeah, you're the front runner. I was just thinking that
Yeah,
you're like the Meno warrior in your workplace,
yeah,
but you've
yeah,
probably been that person for the discussions that came up around parenting in the workplace, and
yes, yeah,
lots of other things
yeah.
that that
Yeah.
we sort of Gen X have basically battled for everyone else.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
That's right. And like, it's great, because I appreciate the fact that it will be better for women coming through, and I think that's so lovely. And so many, like I said, so many women in our agency are kind of hitting that kind of mid-40s, and I start to have conversations, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if you're starting to hit. So it's actually quite interesting. I'm not saying that to them, but I kind of go, it's really interesting. You can start to see some patterns kind of coming through.
Yeah. Hey, I was super gung ho. So when I realized that it was perimenopause for myself, anytime I'd have a conversation with someone and they'd go, "Oh God, I'm not sleeping. Oh, my bones are aching," and I just jump in and go, "Oh, I think you've got perimenopause." I sort of
Yeah.
went like that for about a year, and then realized, no, you know what? Everyone is, because we've all learned that it's all different for everyone, right? So everyone's
Yeah.
going to have a completely different experience. Symptoms will come and go, just like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And now I sort of step back and I wait for them to kind of ask the question. So yeah, did you get this, or do you know if it's like my thyroid, or the questions kind
Yeah.
of go off on a journey until I have a lead in where I go, you know what, you should probably consider that it could be this, maybe you want to talk to your GP. And I never really throw everything out there anymore, because I feel like it's more about letting people have their moment to express how they feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So my gung ho has dialed down a bit, but people can find my stuff anyway, so it's all good. What kind of support did you need, and what kind of support have you had?
Yeah, I think so. After I had kind of the coaching sessions, I think for me, the support that I needed and I got really was probably through communities online. But then from an internal perspective, I mean, it's just the conversations that I'm having internally. I have, our CEO, plus there's another lovely lady on our leadership team. And we just talk about this stuff. And I think that's been really, really helpful, knowing that I have permission to fail if, things are going not well, knowing that I have permission to, if I'm really, really tired, to work from home or to have that flexibility. I think that's been super important for me. I mean, I've put in place, I guess, myself, a lot of things that I've learned along the journey in terms of really trying to nail my sleeping habits.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was kind of the key to improvement, was actually sleep hygiene, waking up in the morning, getting a light in my eyes, resetting the circadian rhythm, really prioritizing that above anything else, and then adjusting my diet. So taking a bit more responsibility for myself. So less meat, particularly in the evenings, really focusing on vegetables, fruits, keeping that as healthy as I possibly can. And just adjusting those things, I think it's had an enormous benefit. I did at one point go on to HRT, but for me, that resulted in a lot of, I just couldn't control the acne that was coming off the back of that. So that was a real challenge. So I ended up going off that, but I have then since been trying a bio-identical hormone cream, which I'm in the very early stages of. And I mean, you know, I'll give anything a shot, really. So
yeah, same.
yeah.
I really like hearing that because, you know, I'm a advocate for HRT. It's worked for me, but I actually know that that's not the case, you know, for everyone. And I have a lot of friends that are quite adamant that they're not going to try it for whatever reason, and those reasons are their own, and that's cool. And I have huge respect for anyone's decision around looking after their own health, as long as they try to find a solution that's going to work for them, right? Like just be on the forefront of it. So good to hear. I mean, I guess you're a little bit estrogen sensitive. Would that be the case? Or
yeah.
So I mean, I'm learning this too, just by hearing other people's stories, and then you know, asking someone who knows. So why would that happen? Because you know, I don't want to promise the elixir of, you know, fixing menopause. Like no, it's not.
And I think it's, you know, it's hard seeking help and finding the right help from a medical perspective. I think, you know, I've had a couple of doctor experiences which weren't great. So you've just got to keep pushing. I think that's the thing. Like if you want support, you've got to go and seek it, because not every doctor is going to I guess get on that journey with you, but you need to find someone who will. So, you know, you just got to keep going. And I think that's about talking to your friends, talking to a support network, and understanding who have they found that has been really helpful in that area. Because otherwise it's easy to stop, because you'll ask one doctor and they'll be like, no, you know, you're not doing that. You're too old, you're too young. It's not going to help, whatever it is. That there's often an excuse, and you kind of, if you just take that, it's not enough, you know. We should expect more, I think, from our medical professionals.
Yeah, I think that this is the next thing that we're going to see change, and I think we're on the wave of that, and which is really cool, right? And I guess, you know, you and I sort of follow what's happening up in the UK, and then there's a flow-on effect into Australia and New Zealand, so it's kind of exciting, the direction. But there's an obvious standout issue, which is you know, the medical the environment, where there hasn't been a lot of training and education given to GPs, your normal GP. But I believe that's changing, and I'm really excited about that. So talking about that particular thing, when you go to a doctor, from your experience, what would you say a woman should do? And I covered this in an actual podcast episode previously, but I just want to hear it from you. What was your winning mode of getting the understanding and support that you needed from your GP?
Well, I first raised it with my actual GP, and I kind of got pushed back around how HRT was, you know, not great. So I actually talked to a friend who had been to see a different GP in Auckland, and I made an appointment with them, and they are kind of a more of a menopause expert, and she tested my hormones, she did all those things that I expected to be done, and then came back, and then I had another session, and, you know, we agreed on what I was going to trial, which I did trial for about 6 months, and that's when I obviously got that acne, and I kind of came off that. And then I wasn't really sure what to do, and in the end I because like I said, I think you just got to keep trying, and if you don't get something you need from one, keep going. So, but it is a couple of years later that I went to a more of a holistic GP, who again tested my hormones, and then we're trying this bioidentical option. So I think, I mean, they've got to check your hormones, right? They've got to kind of see where you are at that moment in time, and talk to you about what those what the symptoms are that are really kind of pulling you down. Because I think in some cases, I know hot flushes, I know that HRT is great for that. So, you know, that's often the buzzword that doctors want to hear in terms of being able to prescribe HRT. But that might not be your biggest symptom. So sometimes you have to play a game, which I think is really unfortunate. But yes, you know, if you want to try HRT, you've got hot flushes. I mean, that's what you need to be saying.
You have to say it.
Yeah,
which is a bit sucky, I think. That's what I said when I went to my GP for the second time to talk about my menopause symptoms and try to access HRT to try it out. And I
Yeah.
had the same thing. I didn't say hot flushes the first time because it wasn't really a big one for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd extracted myself from the really stressful situation of presenting
Yeah.
sessions and strategy and stuff. So I never really had those moments
Yeah.
that messed with my head again. But like by the time I went back the second time and I put hot flashes at the top of the list, it was game on. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I was a bit disappointed that, I kind of
Yeah.
had to sort of lie about it.
Yeah. But I don't think
Yeah,
that's changed in reality. I think for
yeah,
a lot of GPs, you still have to say, yeah,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Whereas a lot of women are going to their GPs, and the first thing that they'll say, and the reason that they're going, is the anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then they get prescribed, anti-anxiety meds and
Yes. Yeah.
antidepressants and stuff without diving a little bit deeper into what else is happening for
Yeah.
you. Oh, okay, there's an alignment. So,
Yeah.
while it could very well be anxiety, there's a lot of shit happening, there's lots
Yeah.
of stuff happening. I
Yeah.
get it. But when you look at a woman's age, hormone profile, and the stacking up of the symptoms,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really highly
Yeah.
likely it could be
Yeah.
perimenopause. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
think it's a really good point. It's actually probably worth writing down all your symptoms before you go to the GP and just kind of going, these are, yeah, because it's probably more than you realize actually at the time.
yeah. So I
Mm.
want to talk about the difference between sort of 5 years ago for you and coming back into the just quite recent.
Yeah.
And I mean, just both, you've mentioned that you've seen a lot of stuff online and in the
Yeah.
media. And
Yeah.
so how has that worked out for you now?
Yeah.
Like, what's your sort of day to day? How do you feel about this whole experience now? How do you view menopause today? And how do you see your future? Lots of questions.
Yeah. I'm way more positive now, I think, about menopause than I was because it just took me by surprise. So I feel like the future for women as they start to hit perimenopause and beyond will be a lot better because there is so much more information and access to support. For me, I guess I have more control of it now, but saying that I still have symptoms and I don't know, whether they'll ever go away, but I am much more able to manage them. And I often catch myself going, oh, okay, this is going on, or I'll have a new symptom and I'll be like, oh, wasn't expecting this one right now. But I think so. I feel more positive about it, which is good because I don't want it to all be a negative discussion. Like we're
Yeah,
women of an age where we should be feeling more confident. We should be enjoying life, and I don't want to feel robbed of that. I don't want anyone to feel robbed of that because they're having, menopausal symptoms. So I think it's just really important that we do put it into a strong light, but we just arm ourselves with enough information and support to be able to get through that in a way that there's definitely negative things and there's things that I wish hadn't happened to my body or my head or are still happening and I wish they weren't, but they are, and I can still have a really good life around that. I should feel proud. I think we should all feel proud of kind of getting through that and coping with the symptoms that we have, and kind of working with it as best we can. So I love the fact that I can now talk about it in the workplace without feeling embarrassed. I mean, just by the fact that we're in perimenopause, and menopause does mean we're getting older, but I don't want it to be viewed as a negative. That's actually should be our prime of life in lots of ways. To your point, we are, women that have worked our way through different careers. We should be appreciating the time that we have now and the positions that we have. In our life. So I want that to be a positive. And I think one of the biggest things is, I think, if I'm allowed to swear, but I just kind of give a lot less fucks about some
yeah,
things. Like some things
absolutely.
like 5 years ago, I'd be very stressed about some things and really kind of quite emotional. Now I'm like, you know what? I'm old enough to not worry about that kind of stuff anymore. Like, I'll just let it go. It just doesn't mean anything. In 3 days' time, I won't even be thinking about that anymore. So I have that ability to kind of move myself on a little bit, which is actually really nice to be able to do. So there's some
Yeah.
definite positives.
Yeah, I like to focus on the positives too and sort of hook into the word pause. Like
Yeah,
you mentioned a few times, you got a couple of symptoms you weren't expecting and it makes you stop for a second.
yeah,
I think that's a good thing. I think it's actually really healthy to be able to pause and reflect, right, on, okay, what's happening to my body? How does this affect how I feel? How does this affect how I interact with people? I think there's an incredible amount of growth in that word pause for
so true.
menopause. And
Yeah,
I think that you've really highlighted that. So
yeah.
Have you got anything else, last words for the listeners? Because I feel like this was such an awesome conversation.
I would just say as much as you can, get as much information as you can, and prioritize yourself, like you're learning, and take responsibility as much as you can for yourself through that period, because there is a lot of challenge, but once you get through it, I think you can really pat yourself on the back and enjoy and appreciate it. And then look at the women that are coming, behind you in terms of their growth and opportunity, and what you can kind of, I guess, take them on that journey and help them through and support it. And that's a really nice feeling as well. Like, it's quite nice that we're able to kind of go, this can happen, it can be really shit, but let's look at the positives and let's come out the other side stronger, better,
Yeah.
and healthier.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Thank you, Helen. Thanks for your time as well.
You're welcome. That was really lovely to see you again.
Yeah, you too.